You're here because you're seeking something. You want to know more about Venus and Leo stationing retrograde. Yes, July 22nd, 6:32 p.m. Pacific. That's when she fully stops moving forward and begins a 43-day backwards cycle over time. A review place. A reclaiming place. A renewal. This video, I'm going to talk about this particular date and several other dates during this 43-day backward cycle. And it doesn't just end there after the 43 days. Venus then has to go complete the rest of its transit as we go all the way to the final day in October. But I'm not going to go that far. I'm just going to keep it to the immediate world on the next 43 days and some charts. If you're seeking something, put yourself in the place of wanting and desire. That's how I'm making this video my intention. So let's bring up the first chart. Here, what you're looking at is a July 22nd, 2023, 6:32 p.m. It's actually 6:33. It's actually, closer to that. And this is when we have, and I'll bring my annotator for those who know me. And for those who don't know me, my name is Nicholas. I am AKA Sparkles of Gold. I do videos like this. I have an annotator on screen. I'm going to show you and point to where Venus is here at 28 degrees. And there's a little S in this software that I have here. That means it's stationing still to go backwards. An interesting degree, but that's been effective and active the last 48 hours before Saturday of several reasons. And this is important to bring in. And it's not going to seem like it's connected, but it is. The reason is the lunar nodes have been just changed into South Node Libra, North Node Aries. And we want to point this out because it's at 29 degrees. And Pluto, which is in the cardinal sign, Capricorn, is at 29 degrees. And we call this a square when cardinal degrees are 90 degrees away from each other. So right now Pluto is squaring the nodes, but we see you could see how I'm making this. Actually, I'll bring up the sun in Cancer, but here's the sun in Cancer at 29 degrees. So we have a cross happening between Pluto and the sun. Here are the nodes. And then you see the squaring going on between all of them. And we have this wild, intense transit going on, building up to this moment where Venus stations retrograde. So the important thing to remember about all this is if you have degrees in your chart, especially Leo, that are from all the way from like 12 degrees all the way to 29, basically, you're deeply affected by this transit. And anyone else watching this into the Leo part of your chart, we know we're going to review the period of 12 degrees to 28, 29 here in the next 43 days. So we also want to take into account the imprinting going on while the station is happening. And that's why I showed you some of the other things in the background. Interestingly enough, we're going to actually look at the sun here in Cancer at 29 degrees, 59 minutes, which means within moments after this official Venus station, the sun will move into Leo and the Leo birthdays will start. So I like to point little things like this out as like if we were cooking up a dish and we were putting the different spices and flavors and colors that actually make this dish. The universe is cooking this dish right now and it's been building all week to this moment, July 22nd. Now, the important thing to remember is with retrogrades is I want to get at least people who have a connotation in their head about negativity or things are going to be messed up, things are going to break down. Those are words that are, in a sense, there's a lot of fear around retrogrades, especially because of the Mercury one and what's happened with popular media, social media, so on and so forth, what gets clicks. But really, you have to look at it and you want to get this in your head. Reclaim. Review, renew. Words like that in your head. So we were going back to look at things. Things from the past in that Leo part of your chart will be up for that review, up for that renegotiation, up for that piecing out and piecing back in eventually. So you want to look at it from that attitude if it helps, so you can have a positive outlook about this story. Now, if I were to bring in a deeper psychological view and how I really feel about it, there's a death and rebirth process happening here, and I will point some of those places out here as we go to that metaphorical death and rebirth place, and how we slowly come out of that place, hopefully by the end of the retrograde and into the rest of the transit, renewed. And for Leo, this is huge because it's like a virtual makeover. You know, my Leo and Leo energies, they want to look good. They want to express themselves. They use many different vessels and attitudes and words and gifts to show their expression, to show their unique life force in the universe. And we do this in many different ways. So it's like, and Venus is involved in this too. So Venus deals with beauty, right? And receptivity and how we love and how we like to merge with the other and the world and how we like to do that creatively. And in the end, it has to do with pleasure and desire and how that is. And all those keywords that I just said, they're all under review. They're all under for reclaiming. They're all under a place of piecing out and putting back or letting go what doesn't work anymore and what you bring forward in that rebirth story. So here is the 28th degree day of Venus with Mercury here. We want to point out Mercury here is important because it's kind of part of this transit in the beginning part of it. So the expression that has happening, the verbal expression, the communicative languages that Mercury has in fiery, passionate Leo, and there's a certain type of charm and charisma with words, but in general with Leo. But we want to look at this. And I bring this up because the next kind of particular chart I want to bring up and talk about and date actually has to do with the 27th of July, because on that day, Mercury actually is going to be officially conjunct, and we'll go to that day. And I'll switch this up for you here. We'll go to this day here because now you see Mercury at 28 degrees. This isn't the exact day, but now you see Mercury at 28 degrees here, less than a week after the retrograde. And we have whatever has been talked about already, like on that day or this weekend of the station, comes up to a certain type of intensity. And it's almost where Mercury's mind for discernment and communication is at the heart of Leo going backwards. And it's almost like this particular Saturday on the 22nd to 5 to 6 days later on the 27th, there's almost like a list, like someone's writing a list in the Leo part of your chart about what they're going to review. If they haven't done it already since June, you're doing it now. And not only you're writing it down, you're pondering and thinking about it, and you're maybe possibly feeling that it's set in stone. Or you're getting the feeling that the things were set in stone since June and what has been expressed and communicated in the Leo part of your chart, or for Leos and Leo risings, Venus and Leo especially, there's like a moment of stopping here and actually having to ponder if it is real, what is of value, right? What is of consequence? What were the words said since the beginning of June? Because June 5th is when Venus first entered Leo, right? And then when we get to June 19th is when we hit that place in Leo at 12 degrees there. That's they call a review shadow period, which we will go all the way back during these 43 days. By the time we get to the end of the 43 days of the retrograde cycle, we're going to hit that place, a 12-degree place that was really first touched upon June 19th. So here, Mercury and Venus, there's a little plotting going on. There's a little beginning of the review, and there's a little bit of a reality check, I think, because of it's starting to hit that Venus is going backwards for many people. Even though mathematically you're watching this video, you know what's happening, things have a tendency to play themselves out in real world situations, in relationship situations, in money and resource places. Relationship, money, resources, Venus. So here is when we start to gauge what we have to deal with, the beginning of it. So that happens on July 27th here, it's like 5 to 6 days after the retrograde station. An interesting point after that is is on the 30th. I want to point this out, and I will bring this here to the 30th. And the reason, and I don't normally do these types of aspects, but I'm going to do it here in this case. I'm going to point to Venus here in the chart now. That's now already on the 30th is a degree back from 28 here at 27. So it's starting to move. It's doing that backwards motion. But I'm going to go actually look to Neptune here in Pisces. And this Neptune and the water sign of Pisces, the relationship that it's having with Venus is what they call a quincunx or an inconjunct. It means that they can't see each other, right? And you can kind of see here, if I were to like go do an arrow directly from Neptune and go straight up, that would be like 180 degrees away from each other, right? But here you don't have that. You kind of have this blind spot here that it's moving, looking at. They can't see each other. Venus is kind of like they're not eye to eye. And what happens here is a disconnect. And here on this particular day on the 30th, Neptune and Venus aren't connecting. And by the way, usually when they do, when there's a Venus-Neptune connection, it's imaginative, it's dreamy, it has no boundaries, it touches the divine, it has to do with inherent, all-encompassing love, eros in the sense that they have this commonality. But here they're not seeing that. You're not feeling it. And there's also a type of disconnect that can bring confusion with this at this point with Venus being in Leo on the 30th. This is actually going to happen again at the very end of the transit. When Venus finally moves past being retrograde and moves forward around October 2nd and 3rd, there's going to be this connection here again. And I find it fascinating after the next dates I'm going to tell you about that we kind of end the Venus and Leo story with another not seeing eye to eye Neptune-Venus connection. Okay, so the 9th of August, and the reason being is one of the major parts of this Venus retrograde cycle has an explosive quality to it, and it has to do with Uranus and Taurus, and it's squaring Venus in Leo. And I will point that out here in the chart. Now, at this point, you'll see on the 9th that the 22nd Venus is at 22 degrees. We can see the sun's catching up, by the way. Like, they're getting close. Make the note here. That's because that means something. And we will look to where Uranus is in the chart at 22 degrees here. And they are squaring off here at 90 degrees. And here we have an explosive, unpredictable week with Venus now in the story, where what they thought since June, since the Venus and Leo story started, got up to this point, is shaken up, is almost crushed. And it's actually the second time this has happened because, I should correct myself. It hasn't quite happened yet, but it's been building up towards that. And here we have an erratic, combustible, surprising, lightning bolt of energy on Venus and Leo, where in a sense they're how Venus and Leo's been living. And I'm not just saying since June. We can actually look to 2015 when the last time Venus was retrograde in Leo, and it happened in Virgo too. But if some of those who are doing a deeper research, there's a connection to that point in 2015 to now, especially those who have heavy Leo placements. So here we have, usually, if we were to think about Venus and Leo, and this is what I like to do on these main things. Let's talk about what will be shaken up here. And a lot of times when we deal with Leo key situations, we're dealing with pride, courage. These are things that Leo learns or Leo shows us. Self-expression, and inherently all these things lead to a place with ego that deals with self-esteem. And one story with self-esteem, and that story in the Leo part of one's chart. But, everything that comes along with the expression of self-esteem and what level someone's at with their creativity or touching their own creative life force. So it comes through vanity and how one looks and the charm and charisma that one has in Venus and Leo, and sometimes how it's packaged. It's through drama, and it's dramatic, and it's fiery intensity that comes with that. And in a sense, it can be, if we go one other way with it, there's a nobility that's involved here, and a certain way of being that's of wisdom that has to do with creative expression, that has to do with, in a sense of feeling majestic and royal. And F the kings and queens stuff, okay? I'm not going to bring that stuff in here, but more about being proud of one's accomplishments and one's own self and the expression of that. And all of that is under review. All of that, those types of keywords, and is under review. And let's not forget, the other side of Venus and Leo can be overdramatic, completely condescending, self-centered in the dark way, pompous attitude. I'm better than everywhere else, so look at me. These other people aren't anything. That type of attitude, I'm being real with you, that is part of the story, and that's certain things that come up in a Venus and Leo story. Now, you out there with Venus and Leo, don't get pissed off at me with that, because I know some of you are what I call backstage Leo, hidden Leos, where you're not necessarily the characteristic Leo of look at me up on stage, even though you secretly want to be. But I know this can play out, and also can play out with those around you. But I want to show all the sides of how Venus and Leo energy can work and play itself out, and how that on that day on August 9th, Uranus shakes all of it up. And it's been building this whole time. It's just on that particular week, we have these peak moments of shakeup, of a wildness, but also possibly a breakthrough, a way of looking at one's own Venus and Leo, or this transit, or the Leo part of your chart, and looking at it from a different angle, a different place, a new view that's really contributes to the review and eventually reclaiming and the renewing that happens in a transit like this. But again, I'm going to be real. There's some stuff that's going to get struck down by this lightning bolt with Uranus and crushed. And for some people who in a sense pride themselves on what they do or what they show or what they have become in this fiery, self-expressive Leo way that is connected to desire, love, and pleasure, you can imagine it's all-encompassing. And if there's an energy or a story that comes in that rocks the boat and almost starts to smash that, it's already been since the beginning of the retrograde, it's already getting pieced out, but smashes it almost. Surprisingly, depending on how invested they are in that story, can have a breakdown, could just be like in pieces, and then going, what is going on? And a lot of times it's reflected in relationships, how one looks at themselves and their energy and their body. One could look in the mirror and been like that mirror on the wall thing. I'm like, oh, I'm beautiful, I'm this and that. And then have these moments of like complete self-doubt, self-esteem crushed, not feeling the same way about the way they look or the way they feel or their expression, where the light out of their eyes gets sucked out. I'm not saying this is for everybody, but these are types of scenarios that happen to this and, in a sense, contribute to what I was saying earlier about a death and rebirth story that happens during this cycle. Now, I brought up the 9th, and I want to remind you here that on September 29th, this is at 22 degrees here. Let me annotate this. This particular here, we go 22 Venus, right? And then here again, I will point out the 22 Uranus. And this is actually going to happen again after Venus moves forward on September 29th. They're going to meet up again, but Venus will not be retrograde. And there is where the lessons start to kick in one other way too, is like, what did I learn? And then how will I use the surprise? Can I take what was shattered or what was shaken up? Or can I take the new view that was shown to me and now I know what it's all about, and then I incorporate that into my Leo part of my world? But we go to an important and the most fundamental, I think, important date of this whole 43 days of the retrograde actually has to do with August 13th. And this is the day, as we saw Venus getting closer to the sun, this is the day at 4:15 a.m. the sun and Venus come together in the sky and they conjunct each other. And I will show you here. You see Venus at 20 degrees and the sun at 20 degrees. And basically what happens here is Venus is slowly moving towards this this death and renewal place in the cycle. And in the middle of it all, of the 43 days, Venus basically gets burned to nothing. Like, gets actually burned down to her purity, her form. Venus keywords: passion, love, desire, values, receptivity, grace, charm. Sex is in all that too. Inherently, with Venus moving through the sun, all of that is the versions of that Venus and Leo has been carrying is burned and purified. And here, in this amazing moment that has been going on since the beginning of time, Venus ruling sacred geometry, this cycle of Venus 7 months evening star, going into the sun and going retrograde and disappearing. We don't see her in the sky. Going through this period through the sun, and even after, we don't see until she eventually comes out as morning star, and will do this for 7 months and starts the whole cycle all over again. We have the most dialed in fundamental astrological transit out of all the transits that you can pick in astrology, all the planets, everything that Mars does, Mercury does. You know me, I'm a big Mercury person. The Venus Sun conjunction and story is at the heart of all of astrology. So we use these keywords that I've mentioned and know that they are changing, and we let go in this moment and we renew. One can have intentions, one can have a vision of what is to be and what is to come. But I think it's very important in stories like this to acknowledge death, to acknowledge nothingness, and a complete letting go and bowing down to nature and the sacred universe. It is only then, in my opinion, that one has that where true rebirth happens. You have to let go of any point of control, any point of power. That happens, true power happens. Ask any Scorpio. They know this story. They know this. Scorpio rising, they know this stuff. The other people too, major, they know it in different ways. You know, people got major Pluto stuff in their chart. They got Pluto's sun or something, Pluto on their moon. They know this in the harshest of ways. But this is a little different. There's actually that grace, the style and grace, Venus, in this letting go into nothingness. And so here we want to take advantage of this day. If those of you who are watching or have a deep connection to all this, it's a real ritualistic day. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Do it quiet, do it loud and big. It's up to you. You have to feel that out for yourself. But you definitely want to mark the day down in this period of time. And if you notice, it's 4:15 a.m. Pacific. So it's like, this is this is on the Pacific coast. So some of you is like, I'm going to get up. I'm going to be up. It's on a Sunday, by the way. So, that's happening. It's funny. Saturn rules Saturday. The sun rules Sunday. And at 4:15 here, it pretty much starts at the planetary hour where I am in the Pacific coast in the morning. For some other people, it's not that way. But for those on the West Coast, this kind of goes into a planetary hour of the sun eventually here within so many minutes. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to ritualize and do that, but I will say you want to keep track of this moment and celebrate it and completely let go into it. Here, we're going to go to August 14th. And this actually has to do with Venus trine Chiron in Aries, which is such a huge benefit and tool to this retrograde cycle. And those who watch my channel, I like talking about Chiron from a timeline point of view, and it's been central to a lot of transits in the last year and a half. It was central to a major eclipse that happened at April 14th in the end of Aries at 29 degrees. There's all this story going on. But here, Venus now is at this backwards part of the cycle. I will point out where she is now at 19, and I'm saying she. And so 19 degrees right there. And let's point out, by the way, the sun's at 21. But here, Chiron's at 19 degrees, and we have this awesome connection between the two that has to do with healing, and they need each other here. The Leo and Aries, they vibe because they're both fire signs, but here Chiron actually gets to help Leo. It's not just Leo or all these other planets connecting with Chiron will help the Chiron moon in your chart. There's actually, the way I'm looking at this is that Chiron in Aries here at 19 degrees and retrograde by this point anyway, because it actually goes retrograde the day after on the 23rd here. As I'm making this video, the Sunday the 23rd, Chiron goes backwards, right? So that's kind of within 24 hours of the Venus retrograde station. Anyway, here they have this trine relationship, and here I actually think Chiron is like standing with Venus in Leo, with the Venus and Leo mirror shattered a little bit, and going, hey, I know this story. I know what it is to look at shattered mirrors, or the wound, or something that's not functioning anymore, that needs to let itself go or push out. So Chiron here is helping, bringing some tonic or salve or potion to Venus and Leo, which Venus and Leo loves to drink potions, right? Loves pleasurable things. Can something be pleasurable with a little bit of pain? It definitely can. They go hand in hand. But in a sense, if Chiron is bringing a different view and help in this dismantling of Venus, the stripping down of Venus, this eventual story of renewal, it's bringing in a certain way of looking at the heart of one's ego and one's self when it deals with self-esteem and who one really is. And you can only go so far, I think, when we deal with like being human and self-expression. It's always ebb and flow. We build and we make something and create and we express and we let it out into the world, and then that dips. And everyone's ebb and flow is different in their lives when it deals with creative connection. And Leo and fire signs in general, I think, help with the blighting of those fires, the building of those fires, and eventually the extinguishing, so something else could be reborn and relit, a new creative story. So here, I think Chiron connects in that way, brings a potion in the south as Venus is like going closer to the sun, about to, in a sense, die, about to sense completely let go into the sun and in the majestic, infinite, divine oblivion that life really is, the all-encompassing place. And Venus is going through this cycle of rebirth, but first here comes the death, and along the way, Chiron is like, I'm helping you out. I'm here. Here's a tonic and potion to get you through this one, but with honesty and rawness that comes with exposing and looking at one's wounds or what it's faulty and integrating that into oneself, into one place before Venus goes into the death place. So I want to point that out, but it's interesting because that happens at 19 degrees, but you know, in September, on the 23rd of September, it actually happens again. And that's the second hit here in this part of the cycle. And on the 23rd here, after Venus is moving forward, it's going to touch this place again, and you have a chance. And I think this is where now Venus will be coming out as morning star, moving out where we see her as she's been an evening star, and renewed, but with a knowledge and wisdom and a type of compassionate view that Chiron and Aries brings. But they both feed the fire signs, and what they contribute as fire signs as the progression of will, the progression of I must make myself something or show myself in the world as my unique individual self. Aries does this on an instinctual level. Leo carries that on when it deals with more of the solidifying of courage and pride and wisdom and all that. And here, a lot of times too, and I'm not trying to be dark on this video, but I want to say one key word. If you can remember through all of this, especially with the Chiron connections, that you could be playful through this, even through the darkness. And that's one thing Leo sometimes can show us, even if they were on stage and it was a tragic opera, that the words that were being said, the actions, the way one stands on the stage, even though they were perishing, that in that perishing, they were even playful in that the energy still was vibrant. It was just a vibrant death, right? A vibrant change, a courageous, noble death, right? So you can actually have fun with this if you portray yourself as someone on the operatic stage, okay? So I don't want it to be like, some of you are going to have a really hard time with this. Some of you are going to have moments of immense euphoric pleasure. You might all have a combination of those things, but don't forget that playfulness through it all. Okay? The other huge part of the cycle, now we continue going after this rebirth that's happening, is Venus now at this point is at 15 degrees. Those of you, by the way, who've had 15-degree fixed anything in your chart, you out of anybody have had so many transits happen to you in the last 2.5 years that this 15-degree fixed point is like the wildest point for many people. Whether you got your Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, you have something at these degrees, you have been through it all. And here's another chapter in that story, because here we have Jupiter and Taurus at 15 degrees. Here's Leo at 15. And here we have a square where Leo is, this is magnified. This is not the first time this has happened. We're at another chapter in this Jupiter-Venus story, and things are magnified. The expression now is magnified. Venus now coming in a different way here of being newly reborn, but still moving backwards, still not quite there. Jupiter magnifies the value systems that Venus and Leo's has, and almost like, and depending on the situation, if one is still working through the review period and the repiecing of themselves from the Venus and Leo or Leo part of their chart, Jupiter magnifies this. But there's already been hints of this before this has all happened in the last month and a half. They had a connection already. There was some sort of connection that already happened, you know, when we were dealing with in the beginning of July, end of June and July. There was already chapter 1 of this. Now this is chapter 2. Hopefully one picks up the wisdom of Jupiter and the quest that it's on and its seeking of higher truth when it deals with value systems, in a sense, because of Taurus, what is organically of value and of worth to someone, which inherently Jupiter in Taurus is ruled by Venus. And so we go to where Venus is in the chart, and Venus is in Leo. Huge week, huge moment in the story. And it will happen again on September 16th at the same degrees at 15 degrees. See what I'm saying? There's a lot of chapters in this story. I can keep going, and I will. On September 3rd, another huge part of the story is when Venus stops going backwards and turns direct, as they say. And at this point, we're already into September. We can already see that the sun is in Virgo. Mercury's there, retrograde. Another video. And we go look to where Venus is in the chart, and she is at 12 degrees, where she originally hit on June 19th, all the way back then. So we went through this whole backward stroll against all these degrees in the story, and now we have the application begin of what one has learned through this whole process from the beginning of June all the way to September 3rd, and Venus through the degrees of 12 degrees all the way to 29 eventually will get to apply after its rehearsal, its backstage rehearsal, get to step up on stage in a sense and put itself on stage and show the possible renewal and the reclaiming of one's self-expression and oneself and the pride in oneself and the honor of death and rebirth, and showing that in a charismatic, dramatic way, as always, and intertwined in all of this. And let me just say this. I think this is important, too, besides the playfulness, that I think pleasure and sexuality are such a fundamental part of this transit that how one engages with themselves that way, how one sees themselves with their connection to pleasure, their connection to sexuality, they're one and the same. If you have other modalities and vessels in your life that you use to create, it comes from the same place of sex and sexuality. The power and the light of that are our most powerful, inherent human right to create in all ways, and how we use our sexuality to show that, to represent ourselves, to give us an immense amount, if things are the way they optimally can be, because sexuality is such a complex, confusing issue and can be, and we all have our story with it depending on where we come from, our culture, who we are. But one can free themselves through pleasure and sexuality. One can renew themselves every day if they wanted to. A lot of us do that, right? But in this case, it's so intertwined with this transit that when we get to a place of Venus turning direct here on September 3rd, show yourself. It's like, do I say go have sex with people? I mean, they're doing that no matter what. It's just how it happens. It's just what it means, like what that means, what that type of expression means to every single person. Everyone's different. But the biggest thing to remember is during a retrograde cycle like this, the opportunity and the space is created for shame and guilt and more weird, off-putting things that have to do with people's connection to their creativity and sexuality. They can be burned through the heart of the sun. That could be let go of too, and that can be renewed. And that, to me, is so immensely profound and amazing. The possibility of what can happen from that place is amazing. And that's one thing I'm taking a look at. And I know for many people who have fire in their chart or are in a story of dealing with sexuality and the connection to creativity, or they don't look at the two things the same. I look at the two things the same. They're one and the same, basically. So whatever that means to you, you take what you want from it. But if you want to ritualize this during this whole retrograde cycle, go for it. Just remember, be good to yourself, be good to others. Intention is key, and come from a deep-hearted love place with it all. So September 3rd is when we have this day of moving forward. When we get to October 7th, basically we get to a place where it's the beginning of October, where we're pretty much getting to the end of the transit and the end of the deal. I went a little too far in this video. I like I always do. I go a little scattered, a little too far. I'll make some edits. I hope some of this has helped you. I want to end with saying this, that in the end, Venus always wants to merge and harmonize, right? I think it's just how it's done, depending on what sign it's in. But I think Venus is a great planet that deals with constant ways and worlds of embodiment, of how she wants to express or use a story or a tool. But it all ends up in the same place. It all ends up in a merging place, not a cutting place like Mars, cut and separate. Venus merges constantly and seeks that out. And in the end, in Leo, wants to majestically merge, and with that power and courage and being valiant in that merging and the sharing of creativity and expression. And it's always, you're Leo, like, I want to share this with you, and everything's I want to share this and this bounty of me with you. It's not just I'm going to share this, I'm going to tell you about it. No, I'm not only sharing it with you, I want to merge with you and do it that way. And I want your bounty and your creativity and your proudness and nobility and self-esteem and all that proud dignity, the whole deal, merge with me. I want to do that with you. Doesn't it feel really good? Doesn't it feel amazing? Doesn't it feel freeing? Isn't it connecting to pure love and light, power? That's what this really is all about in the end. And so we, as humans, we look at this stuff in the sky. We're astrologers. We have different vessels of divination that we use, but it all comes to this place. And so in the holiest of transits, in the most sacred of transits, in the Venus transit story, retrograde story, here we are. I hope in the end of all this that you have some sort of place, silent or huge, but it comes back to that place where you feel you, where you are you, where you then look in the mirror that's been cracked, smashed, and put back together again. And look at yourself and say, I love you. As many of you know, I do my live streams and other types of things. Please, if you're new to this channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. And until next time, as always, I'll see you on the next video.